أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق والنور أرش أفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيبنا وسيدنا وسندنا وشفيعنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين أما بعد قال الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا الذين يقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة وهم راكعون صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
I begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for once more He has gifted us with this opportunity to come together as fellow Muslims and engage in His remembrance. As you know, over the past few nights we have been going over the tragic events that have led to Imam Hussein's ultimate sacrifice on Ashura in the land of Karbala. And the goal of these lectures is not necessarily to be a history lesson. The goal of these lectures is to repaint history one more time in front of you. As you know, when we come to mosque year after year, we're told that Imam Hussein made this ultimate sacrifice for us. And we see people shedding tears for him. And we say, without Imam Hussein's sacrifice, we would not be here. Without the sacrifice Imam Hussein gave towards Islam, we would not be Muslims, and the entire concept of Islam wouldn't be what it is today. As such, many people don't realize where the Ummah, the state of the Ummah had gotten, where we were in history, which led to this ultimate sacrifice by Imam al-Hussein. As you know, in the first night, for those of you who weren't here, I'm just going to do a small recap. In the first night, we talked about the first tragic event in Islamic history. And not that it started with Imam Hussein, nor did it start with Imam Hassan, nor did it start with Imam Ali, nor did it start with Bibi Fatima al-Zahra, sallallahu alayha. But in fact, it did start with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala. We analyzed a few issues that had taken place during the time when the Prophet ﷺ was alive, such as in the Battle of Uhud, when the Prophet had instructed his companions to stay their post. And because of their neglect, because of their worldly desires, they left their post, and they left the Prophet, along with Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib, and a woman and a couple of other companions on that hill. And they say, some of the companions narrate, they said, when I saw the Prophet on that hill by himself, I thought for sure he was dead. Likewise, the Prophet had survived. Well, this was a tragic event because, as you know, in the Quran, it states specifically that the Prophet has more authority over you than you do over yourselves. This is key. If you want to call yourself Muslims, you have to acknowledge this key point. That the Prophet will always have more authority over you. Meaning, if you're heading west and the Prophet says, stop, go east, you have no right to say anything otherwise. The second tragic event we talked about in the first night was what? Was the tragedy of Thursdays. Once again, I will remind you guys, if you guys want to know a piece of history that's crucial for you to be a Shia, for you to be a follower of Amir al-Mu'minin, you have to know of the tragedy of Thursday, which is reported in Sahih al-Bukhari, it's reported in Sahih al-Muslim, and a lot of other Sunni references, as well as Shia. This is when the Prophet was on his deathbed, and he asked his companions, I would like a pen and paper to write down my will. This way the Ummah will never go astray whenever I leave this world. Likewise, one of the companions, Umar ibn al-Khattab, speaks out against the Prophet and he says, nobody move, nobody get him the pen and paper, the Prophet is speaking nonsense. Thank you, brother. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Thank you. So we see that Umar ibn al-Khattab says to the companions, while you'd think if the Prophet was on a deathbed, you would speak to him in a nice softer tone. I pray I'd never speak to my father that way. We find that Umar ibn al-Khattab has the audacity to say that the Prophet is speaking nonsense and nobody move. Nobody get him the pen and paper. The Quran is enough for us. Sadly, in history, there are some scholars that focus more on hadith than the Quran, unfortunately. So we found that this was the first tragic event in Islamic history. From there, last night, what we discussed was what? We discussed the next tragic event, and that was the demise of Lady Fatima al-Zahra, salamullahu alayha. Lady Fatima al-Zahra had been given a gift prior to the Prophet's departure, and that was the land of Fadak. Now, someone raised a question last night, where they said, where did Fadak come from? Well, Fadak came from, it's funny, we have a sister in the audience named Fadak, so she's enjoying this. Fadak came from after the Battle of Khaybar. After the Muslims had invaded the Jews in the Battle of Khaybar and they had taken over their land, one of the villages close by offered the land of Fadak to the Prophet as a peace treaty, saying, we weren't associated with the Jews who attacked you. And they said, we want you to take part of this land and we want you to take part of this crops and make in the produce and make profit out of it. This is our peace treaty. As long as the Islamic government protects us as well, and we will do nothing to contradict you guys. We won't get in your way, we promise. So this was Fadak, and it was given to the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, the Prophet passed this on to Fatima al-Zahra as a gift. However, upon his death, we find that the first Khalifa deprived Fatima al-Zahra of this land. It is reported that Fatima al-Zahra remained angry until her last few days at the first Khalifa for this atrocity that he had committed, for he had deprived her of this land. Another thing to look into is the khutbah of Fadak. Imam Zaman, Ajlallahu Ta'ala Faraja, says, it is a requirement of my Shia to go and read the khutbah of Fadak and see how this brave woman stood up to this Khalifa, stood up to the person who calls himself the first Khalifa, and as he was making these rules, she spoke to him so eloquently. She spoke to him through the Quran, she spoke to him through the Prophet. As in when I say this girl was brought up by the Prophet, you would expect her to speak through the Quran. So we talked about these two lectures. Tonight we're going to be looking at another personality. We're going to be looking at Imam Ali, alayhi salam. And what exactly happened? As you know, after the Prophet's death, there were numerous atrocities that occurred. The first being the usurpation of Imam Ali's rights. And we talked about that very briefly when we talked about the event of Saqifa. The event of Saqifa is another thing to take note of. That while Imam Ali was burying the Prophet, there were some people conspiring to see who's going to rob Imam Ali of his position. On the same day, there was only one man with the Prophet. Sadly. This is the history of Islam. And these are the building blocks to what led to Imam Hussein's ultimate sacrifice, where he had to wake people up. Because there was so much confusion going on, there was so much misinterpretation, there was so many people making up their own hadith by the hand of Muawiyah, to the extent where Imam Bukhari of the Ahl Sunnah school of thought, he reports in Sahih Bukhari, he says, I had to throw away hundreds of thousands of fabricated hadith. Hundreds of thousands. Where did this all come from? Why? And if there are hundreds of thousands of hadith, which one is right? Which version of history is right? Right now we have two distinct schools of thoughts of Islam, each with a different interpretation of history. Even during the time the Prophet was alive, we have some people who like to say that the Prophet has sinned, and it's in the Quran that the Prophet has sinned, where he frowned at a blind man. Which way do I go? I'm not sure. So tonight let's talk about the next point. The next point is going to be about Imam Ali alayhi salam. What exactly happened? What kind of life did he have to live after the Prophet's death? And when I'm talking about these personalities, I just want to say this fact, that no matter how much time I spend talking about these figures, I will never be able to do justice to them. These lectures are not meant to be of justice to them. These lectures are meant to give you little bits of snippets of history to show you what exactly led to the tragedy of Karbala. So before we begin, let's recite a very loud salawat. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
As you know, regardless of your school of thought, Imam Ali is a prominent figure in Islamic history. He's the only man who was born in the Kaaba. How many people knew this? He's the only, alhamdulillah, mashallah, mashallah. He was the only man who was born in the Kaaba. And the first person he opened his eyes to was who? None other than the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As you know, the Prophet was brought up by his uncle, Abu Talib, which is the father of Imam Ali. The Prophet was brought up by his uncle Abu Talib because his parents died while he was at a very, very young age. Likewise, when the Prophet was given Imam Ali, when he saw Imam Ali, there was something about him, to the extent where he went up to Abu Talib, he says, Abu Talib, you've raised me, let me do you this favor. Let me raise Imam Ali. Let me raise this boy, Ali. So likewise, when we're talking about Imam Ali, we're talking about someone who was brought up by the Prophet. And if anyone wanted to question the character of Amir al-Mu'mineen, you're questioning the upbringing of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala As you know, amongst his accomplishments, Imam Ali was the first person to embrace Islam. The Prophet came to the age of prophethood at the age of 40. Whenever he went up to his believers, he went on a mountain and he went to the believers. And he said, if I told you there was an army right behind this mountain, and they're right here and they're ready to kill you, would you believe me? This was prior to him becoming a prophet. But because he had such impeccable character, people would always believe him. His nickname was As-Sadiq, the truthful one. So the people said, yes, I believe you. I believe you. If you say that, I'll believe you. He says, then please believe me when I tell you I am the prophet of God, and I'm here to rid you of these idols that you're worshiping. The people began to make fun of him. They began to throw things at him. They said, you're crazy. You're nuts. But one boy, a 12-year-old boy, comes up to the Prophet and says, how do I become of service to you, Ya Rasulullah? The first person in Islamic history to embrace Islam was Imam Ali alayhi salam. Amongst his other accomplishments was that he was the first person to pray behind Rasulullah. What an honor. Another one of his accomplishments was that he volunteered to sleep in Rasulullah's place when he was migrating to Medina. As you know, when he first came with the message of Islam in Mecca, it became a very hostile environment. People wanted to kill him. People did not like what he was preaching because it was going against their political views. Likewise, they began to threaten the Prophet. And Imam Ali alayhi salam sees this. The Prophet says, Ali, I'm going to be leaving to Medina. I can't live here anymore. Imam Ali says, then let me sleep in your place. So while the Quraysh decide to send the assassins to come and kill you, they'll kill me in your place and you can make it. And you can spread Islam from Medina. Subhanallah, this is a young man in his teens. You know, you look at a child, you say he has his whole life ahead of him. You look at someone older, you say, you know, he's lived life. It's okay if he sacrifices himself. This is a young man. How many of us that age are willing to do that for their religion? So let's continue. He was the hero of Badr. The first battle in Islam, he was the hero. In Uhud, he was the one who stayed on the hill with the Prophet when everybody had turned their back on him. Umar ibn al-Khattab reports, when I saw the Prophet up there, I thought he was done. I ran away from the battlefield like a goat. Yet the Prophet survives, and Lady Fatima Zahra salamullahu alayha reports, I treated 63 wounds on the body of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this was just when he got married, by the way. Many of us like to go on a honeymoon. He was up on that hill with his Prophet. He didn't leave his Prophet once. When we talk about Amir al-Mu'mineen, we're not giving him status over the Prophet. When we talk about Amir al-Mu'mineen, we're talking about the Prophet. Imam Ali does not draw you towards himself. He only draws you towards the Prophet. He only draws you towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As you know, in the event of Qadir, towards the Prophet's departure, he takes Imam Ali's hand. He tells the people, O believers, and people write this down. This is recorded in every school of thoughts, in the books of every person, every school of thought. In every school of thought, it's reported in their books. That what? That the Prophet stopped his ummah on their way. He gets saddles. He compiles the saddles. He makes a little mimbar. He steps on top of it. He says, come here, Ali. I need to tell my ummah something. He says what? He says, Alastu bi'awla bikum. Do I not have authority over you than you have over yourselves? As the Quran states itself. And they say, Bala, yes, Rasulullah, I believe in that. He says, then know this, Man kuntum mawla fahada aliyun mawla. That whoever's master I am, Ali is also his master. And they say, yes, Rasulullah, we believe in you. He said, yes, Rasulullah, we believe in you. It wasn't a day after the Prophet died where people came and they took away the right of Amir al-Mu'mineen. People say in the event of Saqifa, when they were conspiring, why didn't Imam Ali show up? He says, because I say, because Amir al-Mu'mineen does not need this world. he still loves his prophet, the person who brought him up. This is the person. He doesn't need power. In the khutbah of Shikshakiyya, Sermon 3, Nahj al-Balagha, Imam Ali, I mentioned it in the previous nights, I'll mention it again. He begins to express his tabarra. He's upset. He says, they played this game. I had to live life for 25 years as though I had a bone stuck in my throat. I had to live this life for 25 years in a way that would turn the hair of a child gray. And I watched these people give the Khalifa like a game, as if it was a game. They took it from me, and then they gave it to the other, and the other gave it to the other, and that one got killed. And then they come to me. They say they come to me and they say, now we want you as the Khalifa, because the other three messed up so bad, we're going to go with the original plan. And they put me on a list of one of 6. There were 6 other candidates. This is when Imam Ali is expressing his hate. And by the way, in that sermon, someone interrupts him. They give him a letter, and what happens is he begins to read the letter, and then he stops. And the companions say, why did you stop? He says, because this world is not even worth expressing my pain. This world is worth nothing. It's worth the snot of a goat. It's nothing. Someone who's this selfless. Another picture I want to paint to you, this story of Amir al-Mu'mineen, it stays with me every single day of my life. When I come here, whenever I want to speak, I remember this one story where this youth is willing to give everything he had for Islam, and that's in the Battle of Khandak. And this really, really shows you who the leader was originally. In the Battle of Khandak, they built a trench, correct? They built a trench on account of Salman al-Farsi, because that was a Persian strategy. And on the enemy side, there was a man by the name of Amr bin Abdul Wud. Thank you. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And on the enemy side, there was a man by the name of Amr bin Abdul Wud. Amr bin Abdul Wud was known as a legend. They would say that in a battlefield, your strength would be measured by how many people you can kill. And this man was known to kill 1,000. Now, these are Arabian legends. Don't quote me on it. I don't think anybody can kill 1,000 men except anybody who has been bestowed with the power by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they said this man was so large that when he would ride on his horse, his feet would drag against the ground. Again, these are Arabian legends. I haven't heard of anybody that tall. But if that is true, I feel sorry for that horse. Regardless, this man hops over the trench with his horse and he starts poking into the tent of Rasulullah and he says, who's going to come out and face me? Come out, Rasulullah, so I can send you to hell. Rasulullah becomes infuriated. He looks at his companions. He says, which one of you guys will go and face him? For whoever goes and faces him and perishes, indeed Allah has paradise waiting for him. He asks his companions once. Nobody moves. Abu Bakr was present. Umar ibn al-Khattab was present. The people who later become the first and second Khalifa were present. Nobody moves. Suddenly you see a little boy, teenage boy, stand up. He says, I'll go. The Prophet says, sit down, Ali. Now why did the Prophet say, sit down, Ali? Was it because he didn't believe in him? No. He was just trying to highlight the fact that this young boy, this teenager right here, he's willing to sacrifice his life. You, men of Arabia, who've lived life, what are you willing to do? Nobody moves. Again, he asks, who's going to go out and face this man? For out there lies paradise. Again, nobody moves. Narrations tell us they were shaking so much it was as if there was an earthquake in the tent. It was as if there was an earthquake in the tent. That's some serious shaking. Again, Imam Ali gets up for the second time. And the Prophet says, sit down. He says, I'm going to ask a third time. Who is going to go out and face this man? Again, nobody moves. And this boy gets up. And the Prophet looks at Ali. He says, Ali, you know who that is outside? That's Amr bin Abdul Wud, the legend. And he says this profound line that sticks to me. He says, Wa ana Ali. And I am Ali. He may be twice my size. He may be a legend. He may be known to be as fierce as they come. But I am a representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if He wills it, I will win. And if He doesn't will it, that's fine. There's a paradise waiting for me. Imagine someone that age, with that level of understanding. Subhanallah. Imam Ali goes up and faces this man and he wins. But before he delivers his striking blow, this man spits in his face. Now I tell you, in a raging battlefield, someone spits in your face. How long does it take for this sword to come from here to here? How long? Split second? Imam Ali puts down his sword and walks away. People are baffled. What are you doing? Are you crazy? He sits for a couple of minutes and then he goes out and he finishes him off. The companions come and say, why didn't you kill him when you had the chance? He said, because in that moment when I was going to deliver the final blow, he spat in my face and I became angry. And Ali ibn Abi Talib does not kill for anger. Ali ibn Abi Talib defends his religion. He does not kill for his own desires. Subhanallah. Now you could have said he got lucky. He's a young boy against a fierce warrior. He got lucky. And when someone is against these odds, they usually take whatever chance they get and kill that person. For you to go back and give this guy a second chance to fight you, that says something. That truly says something. Now the story continues further. Usually, Arabs had a tradition where after they kill someone, they collect booty. They take their jewelry. And Amr bin Abdul Wud was so confident that he would wear as much jewelry as he could. He would tempt them, say, you want this jewelry, you have to go through me first. So when Imam Ali kills him, Imam Ali leaves everything. He doesn't want that. Why does he want that? He's not there for booty like the people of Uhud were. So the news breaks out to Amr bin Abdul Wud's sister. And they say, your brother is dead in the battlefield. She says, which lion killed him? He was known to wrestle lions, so she's wondering which lion killed him. Says, Ali ibn Abi Talib killed him. Who's Ali ibn Abi Talib? He's a young boy. How did he do that? My brother is the best of the best. How did he do that? He said, we don't know. It was a miracle. She goes out into the battlefield, sees his body, and sees the jewelry is still on him. She starts crying, and then she smiles. They say, why are you smiling? Says, because I know the person that killed my brother was an honorable man. Any other man would have taken everything he has, but this man didn't. And I know that my brother died at the hands of an honorable man. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now sadly, Imam Ali's position was taken away from him. And the people who like to neglect this fact, this is fact, people who like to neglect this fact often like to raise this question and say, if Imam Ali was supposed to be the first Khalifa, which we don't say, Imam Ali wasn't supposed to be the first Khalifa, Imam Ali was the Imam, and that was never taken away from him. If he was supposed to be the first leader of the Ummah, why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention this in the Quran? Where is Imam Ali's name? I don't see it anywhere. And I've developed a response to this, because this has bothered me for too long. Let's talk about the Quran. In the Quran, does it say anywhere, any chapter about any prophet, where the companions of the prophet, upon his departure of this world, made a decision for the next person to be in charge of the religion? Anywhere in the Quran? No. Likewise, in the event of Saqifa, we had some conspirators come together, have some dialogue and discourse, which is also mentioned in my first lecture. It will be uploaded by tomorrow, inshallah. On the first night, I went over the events of Saqifa. On your own time, please look up this event. It's a very pivotal point in our discussions. You have to look this up, the event of Saqifa. Anyways, the event of Saqifa, people come together and they decide that Abu Bakr is the best fit. Where in the Quran has it given the people this authority? We find nowhere. First point. Second point, something as simple as the wudu is mentioned in the Quran. How to do wudu. How many different versions of wudu do we have out there in our ummah? Some people like to put their whole foot in the sink. Some people like to do it over their sock. Some people like to put it over their boots. I don't know where we're going with this. Likewise, the instruction is clear. It's a muhkamat verse in the Quran, yet people still don't know how to follow it. You think if people saw Imam Ali's name, they're still going to follow it? I highly doubt it. But let's continue. This famous hadith of Rasulullah, where he goes up to Imam Ali alayhi salam, before he goes on to a journey to Tabuk. He goes to Imam Ali. He says, I want you to take care of the women and children and be in charge while I'm gone. He was on a temporary leave. He says, I want you to be in charge while I'm gone. Imam Ali says, you wish to leave me in charge? He says, yes. Are you not honored that you're going to be like Harun was to Moses, as Harun was to Musa alayhi salam? But after me, there will be no other prophet. Reported Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Al-Tirmidhi, Sunan al-Nisa'i, all Sunni books. So this is fair game right now. I don't like speaking on my own. It's not that kind of, I want to be neutral in my debate. Why did the Prophet say you will be like Harun was to Musa? As you know, the Quran is very distinct, and it likes to highlight things. It likes to highlight how history likes to repeat itself. The story of Musa and Harun was that when Prophet Musa led the people of Pharaoh, when he saved the people from Pharaoh, and they crossed the river and Pharaoh was gone, he left his people in Harun's hands while he went up to the mountain for 30 days to receive the 10 commandments. Correct? He went up to the mountain. He says, Harun, I want you to be in charge of these people. Now what happens is Musa spends 40 days. Why does he spend 40 days? Not because Allah wants to trick us, but because Allah wants to test us and see what you're going to do once your prophet leaves. So the people are saying, wait, Musa hasn't come back. He's probably dead. What happens to Harun? They reject him. And what happens? They begin to worship the golden cow, an idol. The prophet wasn't even dead, and they're already going astray? Are you kidding me? You don't think people are going to hesitate once Rasulullah is actually gone? You don't think people are going to go astray? This is foolish thinking. Now, why does he say Ali will be to Harun? Ali is to me as Harun was to Moses? Because upon my death, they will take away your haqq. They will take away your rights, and they will go astray. Also, there's another mention in Sahih Bukhari, well, they say when the Prophet says there will be certain people after my death where they're going to revert back to the old times, like Jahiliyyah, and they will follow these leaders who will take them astray. They will follow them inch by inch. Even if they were going to go into a hole, these people will follow them, sadly. So we find that this debate, whether or not Imam Ali was in the Quran, Hadith can back it up. But I'm talking about Hadith right now, and I'm being rational. Is Imam Ali alayhi salam actually in the Quran? Because you'd think if Allah wanted us to follow him, he would actually put him in there, right? Of course Imam Ali is in the Quran. Why isn't he? Imam Ali is in the Quran. We just have to understand how he's mentioned. But before that, let's recite as Salawat. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In the Quran we find that whenever it comes to describing Allah's characteristics, they give him names. For example, we call him Al-Khaliq, the creator. Right? وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ, the wise, Hakim. Right? So we're referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we're giving him a quality. Likewise, when we're talking about Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Quran describes him through qualities. Let's take a look. Every time, there's a famous hadith by the Prophet that says, every time you see the word faithful, mu'ammin in the Quran, it's referring to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Number one. But this is a hadith. Let's look at something else. We can go further in saying Ali's attributes are all over the Quran, and that he is the one who has the knowledge of the entire book. He is the one who is the guide. He is the truth. He is the great news. He is the witness. He is the purified in Surah Ahzab. He is the one who gives zakat while praying, which is this verse I started off with. إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيَأْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. In Surah Ma'idah, Surah 5, verse 55, indeed Allah is your wali. Now people say, why do you say Ashhadu anna aliyan waliyullah? Allah is your wali and his messenger, وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيَأْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ. And the person who offers zakat while in the state of prayer. History records, majority, most of the scholars collectively agree. There are some scholars that like to differentiate with Uthman ibn Affan, sadly. But majority of scholars know that there was only one person who went down in ruku and saw a beggar and extended his finger and he says, you see this aqiq ring? I will give it to you. Here it is. He doesn't say that, but he gives it to him. This was such a beautiful act where you're in a state of worship and you're giving zakat. But the Quran, what does it do? It records it. Indeed, Allah is your wali and his prophet and the one who gives charity and his ruku. So, is Imam Ali mentioned in the Quran? Absolutely. He's mentioned numerous times. Whether or not Allah referred to him directly or not, he is in the Quran, which many, many, many sources indicate. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Let us recite one more salawat in honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen. So likewise, when we're talking about Imam Ali and we're looking at his merits and we're looking at his status and we're looking at what the Prophet said about him, on that day, just for records purposes, on the day where he beat that legend, Amr ibn Abdul Wud, you know what the Prophet says about Amir al-Mu'mineen? He says the strike of Imam Ali's sword is worth more than all the prayer of the humans and the jinns on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the Day of Judgment. That's the worth of the strike of Imam Ali's sword. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about Imam Ali alayhi salam, you'd think that the people would respect him a bit more. You'd think that he wouldn't be upset. You would think that the message would be consistent upon his death, seeing as how for 24 years Imam Ali was revered by the Prophet. As a famous scholar once says, if being a Sunni is to follow the traditions of the Prophet, then Imam Ali alayhi salam was the best Sunni. And if love for Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib is to be a Shia, then know that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was the biggest Shia. Profound point. Precise point. Sadly, for 25 years, Imam Ali went through things that you would never imagine. As we talked about yesterday, he saw his wife die before him. We saw his children cry upon the body of his mother. And on top of that, upon Imam Ali's death, we see that people cursed him for 80 years. They would go on the pulpits and say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. And sometimes we have reports that the guy who was on the minbar would forget to curse Imam Ali alayhi salam. So he would step down and say, oh yeah, by the way. He would come back onto the pulpit and say, by the way, may Allah curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why did this happen? Where were these things coming from? When I say the state of the ummah was so low, it was so tragic to the extent where they brutally murdered Imam Hussein knowing that he is the grandson of the Prophet. It was really bad, and it started upon the Prophet's death. Abu Dhar was one of the Prophet's favorite companions. Abu Dhar was known to never tell a lie. When the Prophet first came with this message, he told Abu Dhar, stay quiet for you because they're going to hurt you if you go out. The first thing, Abu Dhar said, okay. He goes out, the first thing he does, he starts preaching to people about Islam. They beat him up. When they took the right of Amir al-Mu'mineen, all Abu Dhar did was he would just speak out and says, give my Mawla his right back. And likewise, there was many other companions. Salman al-Farsi, Maytham al-Tammar, Ammar bin Yasir, all were tortured for having love for Amir al-Mu'mineen. What happens to Abu Dhar? Uthman ibn Affan, the third Khalifa, says, this guy's giving me a headache, send him to Muawiyah. At that time, Muawiyah had become, who? The governor of Syria, Damascus. He goes there, he starts making noise at the gate of Muawiyah. He says, give my master his right back. Muawiyah gets a headache. He sends him back to Uthman ibn Affan. You know what Uthman does? Uthman, the third rightly guided caliph, according to some people, he banishes Abu Dhar al-Ghifari. He exiles him and his family to the desert where he is left there to rot and die. The Prophet loved Abu Dhar. Why? Because people loved Amir al-Mu'mineen. So many people. Imam Ali was not madloom afterwards. Imam Ali was madloom the day the Prophet announced him as his successor. His family became madloom. They say whenever Imam Hussein was in the battlefield of Karbala, he went up to them. He said, he looked at them and said, why are you doing this to me? He says, because we have hatred towards your father. Because back in the day when Islam was spreading, Imam Ali had killed so many of their family members. Uthman ibn Affan likes to narrate where he says, the reason why people hate Imam Ali so much is because back in the day he killed many good people of the Quraysh. Back in the day, Imam Ali killed many good people of the Quraysh. Not that he was defending Islam or anything. As you know, Imam Ali is killed in his prayer. At the hand of who? Ibn Muljam. Ibn Muljam was a Khawarij, was a part of the Khawarij. Who are the Khawarij? They were a separate sect developed by Muawiyah. Who put Muawiyah in power? The 3 Khalifas before Imam Ali. And boy, did this man give Imam Ali a headache. Who made 100,000 hadith fabricated? Muawiyah. Who was the son of Muawiyah? Yazid. Who killed Imam Hussein? Yazid. Do you see how everything is linked? Everything links one to another. It is known that Imam Ali is so into his salats, he's so concentrated, he has such khushu in his salat, that he is the most vulnerable there. They say in the Battle of Uhud, or in one of the battles, please forgive me if it's not Uhud, he had an arrow stuck through his ankle, and the companions didn't know when to take it out. They didn't know how we're supposed to take it out so he didn't scream pain. The Prophet says, wait until he goes into his prayer, and then take it out, he won't move. And they do that, and he doesn't budge. Because he's in such a state where he's connecting with his Lord. He's talking to his Lord. Nothing can move him. So what does Ibn Muljam do, this despicable human being? Firstly, a woman tempts him with the hand of Muawiyah in it. Uttam, research this woman. Uttam tempts him. Says, oh, Ali ibn Abi Talib killed many of my family members in a day. If you want my love, says Ibn Muljam, if you want my love, go kill him. Then you'll have my love. On top of that, when Ibn Muljam was coming to Kufa, Imam Ali was working in the fields with his companions. And whenever he enters Kufa, Imam Ali says, by Allah, my assassin has arrived. His companions say, where is he? Let's stop him. He says, I cannot stop him. He hasn't done anything wrong yet. What kind of leader would I be if I started to kill someone out of my own temptations? Sadly, some leaders did that. He enters Kufa. A couple of days before he murders Imam Ali, he comes to him, he says, I need a donkey, can you give it to me? Imam Ali gives him a donkey. His companions are baffled. You're giving the killer your donkey? He says, he has not wronged me yet. Ibn Muljam comes, when? In Ramadan. Imam Ali is in his Fajr prayers on the 19th of Ramadan. He takes a poisonous blade. And what despicable man, what a despicable man you have to be to hit someone from behind, let alone being in prayer. He takes a poison blade and strikes him on the head. Imam Ali faints in his prayer. Imam Ali faints in his prayers. He wakes up when Imam Hassan is crying and his tears are hitting his cheeks. What happens? He looks and the man is shivering. Ibn Muljam is shivering and they had tied his hands up really tight. What does Imam Ali alayhi salam say? Say, loosen up his robes. He looks like he's really scared. The same hands that just struck you in your prayers, you're worried about him being scared? He looks scared. Then they take him home, and the man is still crying, and he's crying because he knows what he did, he can never take it back. You just struck perhaps one of the best people to step foot onto this planet. You just killed him. How do you look at yourself in the mirror? And he's shivering. And then Imam Ali says, I have one question from you. Please answer me this. It's too late for you to repent. Don't bother. But answer me this one question. Did I wrong you? And this man is just looking, and he says, no, you didn't wrong me. Did I wrong any of you? What happened in Islamic history? They say after Imam Ali died, for 80 years, they cursed him. For 80 years is not a long time. Imagine the first day your grandpa was born, up until that day. We look at the media right now, the way they're talking about Islam, they're calling us terrorists, Islamists, fundamentalists, Muslimists, any ist out there, they're giving it to us. Same thing. Media was there. When I talk about Yazid, I say he was the best form of media at that time. No different. Media is setting us astray now. Media was setting people astray then. Back then it was through hadith. Right now it's through your iPods, televisions, radios. And I ask myself this question. If I was alive during the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, what would I have done? Would I have been tempted? Because you have to have a certain level of love, and you shouldn't have any worldly desires to love these people. Would you have been on their side, or would you have been with your Imam's side? And you know what? I can't say. And that breaks my heart. I don't know. But what I do know is that right now I'm living in this life, in this era. And I promise I will tear my vocal cords in honor of the Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt for as long as I live. Because I know what haqq is. And it devastates me for me because I see that I'm tempted by many things in this world. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes all the time. It devastates me to know that maybe I could have been on that side. Oh my God. 1 second, for 1 second, if I stray, it tears me apart. There's a famous Ayatollah in Iran from Isfahan. He used to have a problem with his throat. He got very old. He was 90 years old. His throat began to quiver. He couldn't talk anymore. And then he would go to Hawza, and then they would have the microphone on the loudest volume, and he would talk. And then they used to come up to him and says, "You're done. Come on, stop talking. What's wrong with you?" He says, "I'm scared on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Imam Ali is going to come to me." He said, "You had this much voice left. You didn't use it?" For 150 years, we didn't know where Imam Ali was buried. You know, right now he's in Najaf. We didn't know where he was buried. Likewise, to this day, we don't know where Fatima al-Zahra is buried either. When Imam Ali, forgive me, and I'm jumping from point to point because I'm trying to cover all aspects of this person. And I'm trying to relate it back to Karbala as much as I can. When Imam Ali was on his deathbed, he looks at his children and he says his final farewells. He calls Imam Hassan. He says, "You're going to be the next Imam in line." He tells Imam Hussein, "Come here. You see, this is Hassan, take care of him." He calls Zainab. He says, "You see Hassan, take care of him." Al-Banin, who's the mother of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. As you know, her name was originally Fatima, but she changed it to Al-Banin. Because every time Imam Ali would call her Fatima, he would start crying. So she says, "Call me Al-Banin from now on." Al-Banin comes up to Imam Ali alayhi salam. He says, "Did Abbas do something to upset you?" He says, "No." He says, "You've given everybody a role except Abbas." He says, "Abbas, come here. There's going to be a day where my son Imam Hussein is going to be a gharib, is going to be a stranger. Please take care of him." When I say the position of Imam Ali, when we can't talk about the Prophet, he was the protector. As the Prophet likes to say, "Ana Madinatul Ilm wa Aliyun babaha." I am the city of knowledge and Ali are the gates. When I talk about this, I look at a direct correlation to Abu al-Fadl Abbas when it comes to Abu Abdullah. Abu Abdullah, what does he say whenever they reach Karbala? He looks at his brother and he says, "Just like my father Ali was to you, you're the son of Fatima, I am going to be your Ali." I'm just going to narrate just a small scene from Abu al-Fadl Abbas, and just so we go back to Karbala and remember what happened in honor of Abu al-Fadl, in honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen, for this man was raised by Amir al-Mu'mineen. The children are starving and they're thirsty, and Sakina comes up to her uncle al-Fadl. Sakina was Imam Hussein's daughter. She says, "Uncle, I'm starving. It's been 3 days. I'm thirsty. Please, give me some water." Abu al-Fadl says, "I don't have any water. I would have given it to you first." The saddest thing is, you know, when the army came to block off Imam Hussein in the first few nights, as you know, he spent a couple of nights there. When the army came, Imam Hussein's army gave the opposing Yazid's army, gave them water, even gave their horses water. I say, what kind of people are these to take away from the children their water? The children were worth less to them than the horse. Sakina's looking at her uncle saying, "I want water, can you do anything?" Abu al-Fadl becomes so upset and he looks at Imam Hussein, he says, "Please let me go get water." Imam Hussein says, "No, I need you, you're my alamdar, you're my commander, you're my commander, I can't do anything without you, please just stay your post." Abu al-Fadl goes, he sees the children one more time, he comes back, he says, "Imam Hussein, please let me go, I need to get these children water." He goes, Imam Hussein gives him permission, he goes to the Euphrates River, he gets the water in a mashk, he's looking in the water, and he's tempted to drink, he's just as thirsty as the children, he just fought off all these enemies to get to the river, he looks, and then he remembers the children are starving in the tent, and he drops the water, he says, "How can this lip touch water when those children are thirsty?" He puts the water in the mashk, he gets back onto his horse. As he's going, someone comes from behind and cuts off one of his arms. Imagine one of your arms get cut off. What is your reaction? You hold, you start crying, you ask why. He gets back, grabs it with the other hand, he starts riding his horse. Suddenly someone else cuts off his other arm. Imagine trying to go back to the camp without any arms. He grabs it with his mouth, he takes the mesh with his mouth, and he starts throwing. Finally an arrow pierces the mesh, and then another arrow goes into the eye of Abu Fadl Abbas on his horse. Usually whenever you fall off your horse, how do you fall off? You fall off with your hand. Someone came from behind with a club and knocks Abu Fadl Abbas in the head. He knocks Abu Fadl in the head and he falls, but he has no hand. So he falls on the burning sands first. Imam Hussein comes out of his tent, he sees his brother still lying on the sand, and he runs up to him. He says, Abbas, what have they done to you? And I just want to tell you the last words of Abbas before we conclude. The last words of Abbas says, Ya Hussein, Assalamu alaikum, ya Aba Abdullah. My arms are gone, how am I going to protect you now? His eye is covered with blood because there's an arrow in the other. He looks at his brother. He says, Ya Hussein. He never called him Hussein, by the way. He always called him Mawla. He says, Ya Mawla, I have 3 wishes from you. Please do that. Imam Hussein is devastated. He says, tell me, brother, what's wrong? He says, when I was first born into this world, you were the first person I saw, and you recited the adhan in my ear. I wish for you to be the last face I see before I leave this world, but there's an arrow in my eye and the blood is dripping into the other. Can you please remove some of the blood out of my eye? Imam Hussein removes the blood. Abbas becomes happy. He begins to smile. Imagine being in that state. He says, Ya Mawla, I have another 2 requests. The first one is, don't pick up my body. I know you're tired. Don't take me back to the camp. Just leave me here on the sand. Please, Abbas, don't do that. And the third one is, please don't let Sakina see my body like this. Because I'm afraid if she sees me in this state, she's going to fall on the sand and die right there. Likewise, whenever they showed Ruqayya, Imam Hussein's head, what happened to this poor girl? She died on the sand. Imam Hussein says, brother, I have one last request from you, please. He says, what? He says, all my life you've called me Mawla, please refer to me as my brother. My brother says, Assalamu alaikum ya Aba Abdullah. My brother, I'm going to miss you. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.